don't mind other people doing it, but that's the way we are. And sometimes love, I think, is much greater when you don't make a big point of showing it off and talking about it. It's much deeper in my view.
Do you think it's a sign of weakness for a man to say that he loves his wife?
Depends on the man. No, I think some people it comes very natural. To me, it doesn't. It's just like, for example, in a different way, might talk about religion. Eisenhower used to tell me, look, Dick, he said, you should talk about God more in your speeches. There are a lot of people out there, you know, that believe in religion. I said, I can't do it, General. I said, that just isn't the way I raise. I'm embarrassed when I do that. I am, I think, quite profoundly religious in my own way. But I don't wear it on my sleeve. I don't say, talk about God. That doesn't mean I don't believe in God. And the same with love. It's just the way we are.
What do you recall the speech over about your final departure from the White House on August 9th, 1974?
We were then almost past the point of knowing what we were doing. It was we were fortunately guided by the Secret Service and the rest through the crowd. We went down to the diplomatic reception room. Jerry Ford, he's still Jerry then, he's going to be president in 2 hours, was standing there. Betty Ford was standing with him. I shook hands with him, and I said, when I appointed you, I knew that I was going to leave the country in good hands. And he said, thank you, Mr. President. And I said, goodbye, Mr. President. And then Betty Ford said, have a nice trip, Dick. And Mrs. Nixon came through, and we went out to the plane. Julie was not going to be able to go to California with us. Tricia and Ed were. And she was at the bottom at the ramp leading up to the entrance to the helicopter. I kissed her, got into the helicopter. Mrs. Nixon had already got aboard ahead of me. Turned around. There were all the crowd out there on the lawn, as had been in so many cases before. And I kind of raised my hand. I don't know whether it was a salute or a wave, but that was it. Turned, went in, sat down in the plane. Heard the engines whirl up. I closed my eyes. I was pretty tired then. Been up all night thinking, so forth. And as the helicopter began to rise, I heard Mrs. Nixon, who was sitting in the seat next to us, speaking to no one in particular, but to everyone. And she said, it's so sad. It's so sad. And then as the helicopter went on, I must say, I didn't have any feeling of bitterness or rancor or self-pity. I found myself thinking of what I'd seen in that room. When I made my speech, Herb Stein, marvelous man, great economist, one of the most unemotional men in the world. I remember him, I can see him now, tears just streaming down his cheek. Hard for me to finish the speech without breaking into tears myself. And I thought how much I owed to all of those who had worked so hard, and how much the country owed to them, and how fortunate we were to have such marvelous people, such good people in our administration. And I thought of Julie down there, and Tricia and Ed and Mrs. Nixon. No one, believe me, no one had a finer family. No one could have had a more supportive, loving, kind family, and how lucky I was there. And then as the helicopter moved on to Andrews, it was understandable, I guess, that my thoughts would go to the other times we'd gone to Andrews. We went there on the way to China. We went there twice on the way to Russia, to the Mideast, to Europe, around the world. All the great events and initiatives we were participating in. And I found myself thinking, and this is also rather characteristic of me, not of the past, but of the future. What could I do now? What? Seems presumptuous that I even thought it then. What can I do to see that these great initiatives that we began would continue? And that's the way it was. I think perhaps the the best description of how I felt then. And frankly, maybe it's the description of my philosophy generally, was of a little couplet that I received from Claire Booth Luce. This is in the spring of 1973. Watergate had just exploded all over the place, and she sent me a one little card, 3x5, with this couplet on it. It was the ballad of Sir Andrew Barton, and it read, "I am hurt, but I am not slain. I shall lay me down and bleed a while, and I shall rise and fight again." That's the story of my life.
You, even at that moment, you were looking ahead and thinking about what some people would describe as a comeback. You say there are no miracles in politics except the miracles that you make, and you weren't able to make a miracle over Watergate. Are you making a miracle now? Are there political miracles ahead for you?
Well, I know that many of my friendly quote, end quote, critics in the media have thoughts that maybe I'm thinking of a comeback in some sinister way. Maybe we could amend the Constitution so that so that we repeal the 22nd Amendment, which says that one can be elected president only twice, of course, which rules me out as a potential candidate for president. I even saw ridiculous comments to the effect that I might run for Congress in the state of New Jersey or the Senate in the state of New Jersey. My God, I mean, I wouldn't even consider going to the Congress or the Senate at my age. That's for younger people. I would say that my role is a very different one, hard one to fill. Once you've had power and are able to do things about your ideas, it's very difficult just to have ideas and hope that others are going to do something about it. But as long as I'm able to breathe, as long as I'm alive, believe me, I'm going to continue to work for what I think is a real peace. Not the sappy kind of peace and simply the absence of war, but a real peace with our adversaries and also with our friends. Maybe I can contribute something in that way. And that's about it.
A lot of people felt, and I suspect still feel, that despite the terribly draining and emotional things that you went through over the months leading up to the resignation, and then the things you've described about the days and the day of the resignation itself, that in all the things you said, you never simply said, "I'm sorry." I think people also feel that at a lot of points, if you had gone on television and said, "Look, I was involved in a lot of these things. There were a lot of things that were wrong. I got a country to run. If you're going to impeach me, go ahead and do it. But here it all is." But instead you said, "I'm not a crook." And at no point did you say, or have you said, that something as simple, which is you've said that you won't grovel, and but there's a difference between groveling and being sorry. Are you sorry for it?
My answer to that question, and to those who say, "Will you apologize? Are you sorry?" is simply a fact. There's no way that you could apologize that is more eloquent, more decisive, more finite, or to say that you are sorry, which would exceed resigning the presidency of the United States. That said it all, and I don't intend to say any more.
How do you think how would you like to be remembered in history?
Henry Kissinger said before I left office that he thought history would treat me kindly. No, Henry Kissinger said before I left office that he thought history would rate me as a great president. And my response was that it depended on who wrote the history. A man cannot sit on his own jury. However, if I were to be presenting the case before the jury of history, I think this is what I would say. The instant historians, understandably, are obsessed with Watergate. They see hardly anything else about me except Watergate and rate me very low. I understand that. Historians, maybe 50 years from now, I would hope would see it in more perspective. Yes, there was Watergate, the first president ever to resign the office. That's part of history. But there's also a more positive part. As far as the presidency is concerned, I'm the president that opened relations with China after 25 years of no communication. I ended a war in Vietnam in which there were 550,000 Americans there when I came in, and none when I left. I ended the draft. I negotiated the first arms control agreement with the Soviet Union. I restored balance to the Supreme Court through my appointments. I initiated programs in the field of the environment and hunger and cancer and drugs that I think are very sound building blocks for the future. These are positive achievements. They must be there along with the negative ones. And I hope that the jury of history would consider that. I'd say finally, however, that as far as history is concerned, that my proudest legacy is something else. Winston Churchill, in his book Great Contemporaries, wrote of Prime Minister Asquith, great British Prime Minister at the beginning of World War I. And he said his best memorial is his family. And I would say that my best memorial are my children. And I would say that for Mrs. Nixon in spades, because she made them what they are.
It was said of Queen Mary Tudor, or that she said when she died and they opened her up and they would find the word Calais, the town that she had lost in France, written on her heart. What would be found written on your heart?
Easy. Pat.
You said when you were vice president in an interview with Stuart Alsop, you said, "A major public figure is a lonely man. I can't confide absolutely in anyone, even in Pat. It's something like wearing clothing. If you let your hair down, you feel too naked." And Henry Kissinger has written of you, "The essence of this man is loneliness." Do you consider yourself to be a lonely man?
No, I never fret about it. I would say, however, I would be perhaps amend Dr. Kissinger's comment this way. The essence of virtually every great leader, and I'm not saying I'm great, but the essence of every great leader I have known, he was a lonely man.
In 1972 in China, you told Zhou Enlai that what you asked for and hoped of in your life was that you would have, you said, in China in 1972, talking to Zhou Enlai, you said that you always learned more from your defeats than from your victories, and that you hoped that at the end of your life you would be able to say that you had had one more victory than defeat. Do you feel that you can say that?
That will depend on what happens. If, for example, there's a breakthrough in cancer, that's a victory. If, for example, my environmental programs are carried out in a responsible way, that's a victory. If, for example, the China initiative doesn't fall apart, that's a victory. Let me say, if we didn't have the China initiative now, we'd be in terrible trouble. And that's why I'm doing everything I can to keep it together. If, for example, we're able to build in the relationship with the Soviet Union, to reestablish a hard-headed détente, that's a victory. I consider it a victory, in other words, if we move the world toward peace and justice and progress. That's what I live my life for. That's what I think we contributed toward. And that's why, in the balance of my life, to make sure that I come out with one more victories than defeat, I'm going to do everything I can to see that the initiatives we began are not lost, but that they are nurtured and that they grow.
Do you consider that you've had a good life?
I don't get into that kind of crap.
Enough said.
Stay there. Don't take your mics off for 1 second. I need a shot. Just chat with each other. I need a shot for that.